Hello and welcome to the Box Angeles podcast with me, your host, Mike Elder. It really means a lot to me that you're listening to this episode today, however you stumbled on the program. A little housekeeping first. I got to shout out Patreon member John Wendler. Thank you for subscribing, John. I really appreciate it. If you want a shout out, head over to the Box Angeles Patreon, subscribe. You get all the access to all the audio archives. It's a really good deal, $5 a month, and it supports the show. And I'll shout you out if you stay subscribed, like John. Appreciate you, John. Also go to my YouTube channel, boxangeles.com/YouTube. It's got video clips and full video episodes of all the new ones out there. It's a treasure trove of good content. I would love it if you clicked subscribe over there. Who's my guest this week, though? Let's get to it. It's the great actor and comedian Ryan Gaul. You might recognize Ryan from shows like The Last OG or Bajillion Dollar Properties or Superstore, or maybe on stage at UCB down the road or the Groundlings. He's everywhere. He's been in this game for a really long time. And as we talk about, he's worked steadily. He's never had a day job since moving to LA. Well, he had one shortly. He'll talk about that. But overall, he's just had a steady, thorough career. We talked about that and how cool that is and how lucky he is to have that happen. So it was a really great conversation. I hadn't met Ryan, I don't think, maybe in passing, but not in person. And we had a really good conversation. So I think you're going to like it. Like, if this is the first episode you're listening to, you're in for a treat is what I'm saying. So, like, good for you. Good on you. Thank you for coming and listening. Thank you to the OG people for listening too. Obviously, I don't want to forget about you guys. But anyways, I'm talking too much. Without further ado, I give you...
I'm Ryan Gaul.
Hey, Ryan.
Hi.
Thanks for coming down, buddy. It's good to talk to you.
I'm glad we could finally make this happen.
Yeah,
I'm glad you could finally make
Hey,
this
I'm
happen.
persistent if nothing else. You know
No,
what I
I
mean?
love it. You're very accommodating when I'm like 4 times in a row saying like, I can't do it today.
You know what's funny about that, though, is like you say that from your perspective, but from my perspective, I think you're being incredibly gracious to come down here. I don't know where you live. I don't know if you're close, but you're coming down here, taking time out of your day to talk to somebody you don't know. So I find you to be incredibly gracious. And if you have to reschedule a couple times, that's the least of my concerns, honestly.
Well, that's very nice of you. You came highly recommended or endorsed from Emily Pendergrass.
Yeah.
And when she mentioned you, I was like, oh, if she had a good time, because she's one of like my dearest friends from the Groundlings.
Right. Yeah, I try to be very accommodating, as I say, because I didn't know Emily beforehand, but it's the same thing. She rescheduled a couple times, and I'm just...
Oh, she did?
Of course, everybody does.
We're
Let's
actors.
be honest.
We're stupid
I got the
actors.
casting director, Michael Sanford, coming this week, but he canceled because he's got a callback this week now.
Of course.
Everybody's canceling, but I am patient, if nothing else. Is
You're
what
very
I
gracious. Every time you respond, you're like, no problem. I'll check and get back to you. And I was like, all right, he's a pro.
Well, I'm being honest with you. Like so many people that have done this podcast don't know me. Honestly, like I've met people at UCB and IO. I worked at both those for a while, but like most people are just doing this out of the kindness of their heart, I think.
Yeah.
Or like paying it forward, or like they've all been there and can understand the struggle of somebody trying to break through or start out. So I think everybody's partly doing it narcissistically because they like hearing themselves talk, but also because they're paying it forward is what I tell myself.
It may be a mix of the two. I do think like there is a weird release that takes place when somebody asks you like, why'd you get into this? Why'd you do this? It's like, thank goodness I can release this information and let people know why I got into this, why I'm doing this. There is a narcissistic thing and it's an ego thing. And it's also just like a therapeutic thing to talk about it. So yeah, it is. It's paying it forward is the nicest way we can paint this. I get requests for like podcasts from like teenagers sometimes.
Oh, really?
Like, hey,
you're a hot commodity.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm
in the Gen Z market.
I'm saying quite the opposite. It's like I'm getting, instead of an audition for a sitcom that will pay, I'm getting like 12-year-old Gerald who's like, hey, I'm interviewing actors and I'd love to talk to you. I'm from Minnesota and I...
The irony is I'm from Minnesota. I don't know if you knew that.
Are you really?
I'm Gerald. But
wait a minute.
But when you think about that, though, didn't Judd Apatow do that? I remember hearing him reaching out to big celebrities when he was like 15 and interviewing them. So you never know if Gerald becomes the next great Paul Thomas Anderson or something.
But you know, I respond to every single person. And by the way, I've given, this is maybe the biggest mistake of my life. but possibly my greatest victory is that I gave out my phone number on Comedy Bang Bang.
That's hilarious.
And I get, to this day, probably like 30 texts.
That's hilarious.
To probably about, I would say like 50 to 60 texts a week from people. Not a lot of phone calls as well, but I don't answer any phone call now.
Smart.
Smart. Necessary. And but I respond to every single one.
What? That's fascinating.
I don't know why.
Positive stuff?
Yeah, there have been, I think, 2 that have been a little like weird, and I just immediately blocked them.
Yeah. That's so funny. I talked to Carl Tart a couple months ago, and he was talking about how podcast fans can be very weird and very like
they're intense.
upset if you don't do certain things. So to open yourself up to that lane of a free form conversation is probably sketchy.
Maybe because I was so open about it, people are like, well, let's respect the boundaries here and
crazy.
be cool. I get a lot of just like, hey, you, my wife and I listen to you. We really love you. No need to respond. I get a lot of those.
That's cool.
And I just like heart it and go ahead with my day. And I'm like, oh, that's cool.
When did you give it out? How long ago?
Probably like a year.
And people are still finding it and texting you. That's crazy.
Now Scott makes it a point every time I do Comedy Bang Bang to go, and don't you give your number? So every time I give it out again, no matter what character,
no matter what happening once, but that's so funny.
I did a live show originally. It was a live show
that makes sense.
in Maine, and I gave it out, and I got a lot of calls. That I woke up and I sent a screenshot to a few people, and I was like, "What is happening?" But I just went through and just
Classic
quickly
Scott.
said thanks. Yeah, classic Oscarman.
Speaking of paying it forward, Scotty. No, you know what's funny about paying it forward though is that lately these have felt therapeutic. These conversations I've had, and now I want to go to my therapist and say I'm paying it forward to you by giving you my session today, Miss Therapist. You know what I mean?
That. I love that. Do you have
She's only getting smarter
What's
from
her
mine.
name?
Corinne.
Oh, I was going to say.
She's right over here. I walk to everything I do.
Do you see her in person?
Oh yeah.
Oh, mine's on Zoom.
I don't want to do it on Zoom. I have a day job. I do
weird.
enough Zooms.
I know. I feel like I see my therapist and I'm like, I don't really know what you look like. I see you on Zoom, but you look like a news anchor.
Are they in LA?
I think. I don't know. I do not know that.
Isn't that weird?
She very quickly, like, anytime I'm like, and how are you? She's like, that's not important, Ryan. So let's talk about you. Like, she pushes it.
I do that too.
Every time
like, tell me about your weekend.
So how are you? Tell me, like, what's the big thing on your mind this week?
Is that an improv thing? I wonder if every improviser goes in there and tries to yes and their questions back
Maybe.
to them.
Or it's like an avoidance thing of like, I don't want to talk about my job. I don't want to talk about my problems.
Well, unfortunately, you have to talk about your problems today.
I would love
Wait,
to.
Ryan, I saw you first in House of Lies. That was my first, I think, introduction to you. You were in like, what, the 3rd or 4th season maybe? You came in later, right?
Yeah, the 3rd. I remember because my son, the day I booked that was the day my son Linus was born.
Oh, very cool.
And I was like,
Which
it
one
was
was
on my mind of like, oh my God, how am I going to, how do I deal with having a second child?
Yeah.
And it was almost like whatever powers that be were like, here, we'll take you out of the house for 6 months. You don't get to deal with your child. Yeah.
I'm getting the avoidance as a common theme from you. Wait, I want to throw you under the bus. Which was better news, getting that recurring role or having your son?
Listen, I have to say the role was better. No. The Linus is the best thing in the world.
That's awesome.
But the mixture of the two was really like, it just took all the pressure off.
Very cool.
And put the pressure on at the same time. But that was very fun. That's where I met Ben Schwartz.
Yep.
And eventually like became pals with him and have done some Ben Schwartz and Friends shows with him traveling around the country, a few here and there. I've been lucky enough to do. Those are just the best. Well,
what I was going to say was from the House of Lies, like that was where I really saw you, and I've seen you around UCB and stuff, but I was noticing on your IMDb how steadily you've worked since House of Lies, it feels like, and I just wanted to ask you, like, looking back on that.
Yeah.
I think you got into Groundlings a little later in life, but like you've had a steady career, it seems like, from 2013, even through the pandemic. You were on the last OG, pushing through that.
Yeah.
What do you think, looking back the last 8-10 years, now 10 years, I guess it's 2024, how do you feel about your career? I asked the same question to Emily. I don't know if you listen to Emily's question, but or Emily's podcast, but I'm just curious, like, from my side, I'm still struggling to get my first TV credit.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were wrestling with that for a while. But then to suddenly jump from House of Lies recurring to the last OG bajillion-dollar properties, you're consistently working. So what do you think when you look back the last 10 years?
It was, I guess when I look back to, I was stupid enough when I first started auditioning. When I was in Sunday Company, and I remember that's where I got an agent and a manager. And I was stupid enough to be like, all right, so now I just audition and one of them will pick me to be on their show. I really didn't think it was a possibility I wouldn't get something. And somehow, so when I got House of Lies, I was like, great, this will be my starter. This is my appetizer, and now I'll move forward. And then, I got into the main company at the Groundlings, which was, so wonderful because it gives you this anchor of performance in LA where I do feel bad I don't feel bad, but I feel like it's such an advantage to have a home base where you can perform consistently and stay sharp. So when you do get called in for an audition, you're not like, oh, I got to get the wheels moving again. You're already there. You're ready to go.
Right.
And so it went from House of Lies, and then I got into the main company. But the Groundlings, we don't get paid. We do it all out of the goodness of our hearts. But it's so fun. And then I can remember getting Superstore.
Yeah.
And I went in for that, and it was a day where I had nothing, no time to prepare for that. And I looked at the signs and was sort of like, I'll just rip through it as best I can and get out of there. And they were like, oh yeah, we liked that. By the way, I think Jordan Peele, ironically or coincidentally, who produced The Last OG, was up for that part.
Oh, crazy.
On Superstore.
I think if he was like the exact same person.
Yeah, we're very similar. But we had performed at the Groundlings many times together because he wasn't a Groundling, but he was always a guest because he's a brilliant improviser. And so he declined that because I think he was working on Get Out at the time.
Oh, okay.
And I was lucky enough to be like, I'll take those dregs, I'll eat that up. And then from there it went, little bits here and there and little TV bits here and there. But having the Groundlings as that anchor allowed me to, I didn't have the time to worry about, nothing was precious.
Right.
It was just like I was going to auditions being like, well, I'll get what I get. And my manager is really great at being like, listen, at this point, you're either in the mix or you're not. Like, do your thing, go in there, show them who you are, be authentic, don't worry about showing them what they are looking for. Be who you are.
Yeah, I love that.
And because sooner or later they're going to be like, oh, who you are is perfect. And then you're going to be able to do that easily on screen.
Right.
If you show them something that is not who you are, it's going to be hard to replicate.
Agreed.
So that looking back on 10 years, I think the Groundlings always floats up and I go, I'm so happy I had that as like good audition, bad audition, good booking, bad booking, but anything that happened, I always had the Groundlings to kind of float back to and be like, I can get on stage here and it's going to be a blast and I'm going to have fun and I'm going to get better.
Sure. But back to the first comment you made, you said I sort of expected to get something, right?
Yeah.
Did you have that mindset sort of the entire time? Was it just sort of a good, solid confidence
it's
you
faded.
had?
It's faded. that feeling has faded.
Because the
Isn't
more
that
you
weird?
worked, you should be more confident.
No,
right?
because I think the more you work, the more you go like, oh, I shouldn't be here. Like, why am I getting paid to do that? Like, you start to question things.
Okay.
The more ingredients in the pot, the more you go like, well, this tastes different. I don't like. I still, and you also get older and you're like, oh, I'm aged out of being like the beer guy in a Bud Light commercial. Now I have to be young dad, and now I have to be normal dad. I'm like, I'm not young dad anymore. I'm just dad. Or God, am I old dad now? I might be old dad. I think I am old dad. But though all the questions, the longer you stay in, the more questions you have, the more you question yourself. And I'm not young and dumb anymore. Now I'm sort of like more experienced, and with that comes more criticism of yourself.
Sure.
So,
but do you appreciate things more now?
Oh,
do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I handle things differently. Even on a set, I think I'm more grateful. I'm not walking in just being like, cool, you guys hired me, and like, what do I do? Where are my lines? What? Now I'm like, it is kind of weird because now things are a little more precious. So I don't know what that means, but that's how it feels. Is like, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this since I took my first improv class in 1998, I think, in Boston. And God, when I took that, I was like, my biggest concern was going to the Gap to get a pair of khakis to wear to the audition, because I thought, like, well, I have to look nice. I have to look nice for my audition for the improv. And I bought a pair of khakis that still had like wrinkles in them when I got on stage. I really remember that. And that was my biggest concern. I wasn't concerned about whether I could be funny on stage. I was like, oh, that's like neither here nor there.
That's secondary.
Yeah. And now it's like, oh my God, if I can get out of bed and find a clean t-shirt to go to this audition in, that's a victory. But I also am like downloading sides and trying to go over them much more. Like your priorities definitely shift, and I'm sure they will continue to shift.
That's weirdly foresight, though. I feel like you just came from a commercial audition, you said, and that's sort of all how you look, right? Like the khakis probably would book it for you, or they wouldn't. So it was a weird foresight to like, talent is secondary in a lot of the things that we do out here.
Totally, because you get an audition. They're like, up. You know, it'll say wardrobe, and it'll say upper scale sports party goer. And you're like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And you go to the audition and people are like in Eagles jerseys with like a hoodie and then a tie on. And they're like, I don't know. I guess that's what I thought was. And they all have khakis. Everyone's wears khakis. Everybody's.
I like that you said that the things are getting more precious to you, because I think a lot of people in sort of my position, and I've been told this is wrong, so feel free to reiterate that. But a lot of us, I think if I could just get one, then I'll get another one. But it sounds like you're kind of the opposite. You're like, I'm going to get one. And now you're just sort of like, I hope I get another one. I hope I get another.
I go to sleep at night thinking like, I'm never getting another one in my life. I will never get another one. I really think that. I'm like, I've gotten my last one. Even when the only reason I got the last OG, and this is one, is because I declined that audition 2 times because the breakdown that was sent from my agent was like, kind of a former rock star, Thai boxer. And I was like, that's not me. I'm like dad bod and kind of like boring white guy. I'm like, that's not me. And so they came back and they were like, no, they want to read you. Like, and I was like, I don't want to. Again, 3rd time, I was like, fine, I'll go in. So I put on like the coolest thing I had, which is a brown like leather jacket, and I was still so boring looking, but I did not care. And I'm sure you've heard this over and over from people. It's like people book the stuff they don't care about.
Oh yeah.
And there's such an energy that's given out when you're like, you're not trying.
Right. The sexy indifference.
Yes. And it's so cliche, and it sounds, it's boring even to talk about sometimes, and you can't teach it and you can't plan for it. It has to happen organically, where it's like, no, I just don't care about this one. That's why people book multiple things in a row because they book something and then they're like, I'm set.
Right.
I'm set. And here we go. And then the next 3 things they go in on, they book as well. And they're like, why? It's because you didn't give a shit. You went into those things and did not give a shit.
Yeah.
And just like, I wish there was a way you could like impose that upon yourself and be like, okay, here's a pill you take and you will not care.
Yeah.
I guess that's Vicodin.
Or ketamine, maybe.
That's true. That's true. Maybe that's why like there's a lot of drug addicts in the business, because when they take drugs, they don't care. But
I had Will Hines on a second time recently, and he said something I found so fascinating because I think he's one of the best at those sort of co-star, come in, do 5 lines, and be gone. And he said his advice for auditions is pretend like they already know who Will Hines is. They know you are. You're the Will Hines. You're the Mike Elder.
Yeah.
And just give it that energy that your friends all know you give. All your friends know who Ryan Gaul is. Give that energy, right? And then that sort of exudes, and I think that kind of gives that sort of sexy indifference a little bit.
Yes.
It's like, you already know who I am. I don't need this audition.
That I agree with him 100%. The problem is if you there's so much gray area where if you get it wrong and you're like, I'm Ryan Gaul, and you go into the room and you're like, I'm going to follow those instructions, but it's not authentic. It comes across as like, what, this man's crazy.
Right.
Like, for example, one of my first acting coaches, when I first got out here, he was like, when you finish an audition, take your script and throw it in the trash and walk out of the room before they even say and give you notes. And I was like, oh. And he was like, don't give them a chance. Make them call you back in the room. And I was like, that's brilliant.
It's a power move.
That's awesome. That is Hollywood. And I did it once. And I took, it was a commercial audition. So it wasn't even like crazy important. And I had a script I didn't even have a script. I finished it. I had a partner in the room and I just walked to the door and like opened it and was like, boom. And I heard like, hey, where the hell are you going? The director was like, where are you going? Where are you? And I was like, I have stuff to do. And I was like, oh no, what's happening? This is falling apart. And they were like, we're not done. We were going to have you do it again. And I was like, well, do you want me? And I was so cocky and it was awful. I was like, do you want me to do it again or not? And they were like, nope.
Oh, no.
And I was like, well, good, then I'm out of here. So my point being, like, there's
a line.
Will is so right, like, about that philosophy, but you have, and he's probably like enough of a veteran where he can do that. But it's a very hard thing to just pull off if you're starting out.
Well, and that's what I hate about self-tapes, right? Ugh. Because you can't even get a note. Like, you don't even know if there's a flow chart, I guess, of what's right and wrong about this audition. It's like, was I on the right track or not?
Yeah.
And we don't even know where to start on the flow chart. So that's where our mind just fills in and we don't even know.
No, it's a advanced version of, they say never pick out your own headshot. Like have somebody pick it out or have your agent or something, because you don't know how you look.
Right.
It's the same thing with self-tapes where I look through them and I'm like, I like that one because my hand wasn't doing this when I did that tape. And they're like, no one's looking at your hand, Ryan. Just like, it's the performance. Like, I always pick the wrong one. Yeah. Always. My agents constantly.
That's really interesting. I have heard that headshot thing, but I never thought about it with auditions.
It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
Or it's similar. It's like you're
biased against your own weird things.
Against your own performance.
Yeah.
Because you hear yourself differently. You see yourself differently. So I don't know. I always try to, if I have somebody reading with me, be like, well, just let me know the best takes.
Yeah.
And
I love having somebody read with me. Like, even if I don't need another reader, just somebody directing me, because for that same reason.
Oh, hell yeah.
I can't direct myself. It's brutal in self-tapes.
No, you can't. Like, even if it's somebody, like, if it's anyone, whether it's, a neighbor that has never acted before, they're going to be better off at going like, that didn't feel real.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I don't know. I can't, have you done self-tapes just by yourself and recorded your other lines?
No.
Okay.
Well, yes, but not for a while.
Okay.
I have a lot of friends that are really willing to help out.
That's good.
Why, you
That's
need a
good.
reader?
You're
I
ahead
got
of me.
you.
You're ahead of me. Usually I call like 5 to 6 people and they're like, I'm working. I'm like, you're unemployed, man. What are you doing? I have
Who's that, Brandon Sornberger?
Yeah, Brandon Sornberger.
Sounds like Brandon Sornberger.
We worked together, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Back in Boston.
What?
Yeah. We started back in Boston.
Well, I knew you started in Boston. I didn't realize you guys were there at the same time, but that makes sense.
We used to work every night.
At a bar?
No, at Improv Asylum.
Wow.
Yeah,
Very cool.
we performed on stage together for.
Oh, perform together. I think you meant work as in like.
Well, I consider the art work. You'll have to understand that about me, and you'll probably get it as we talk and continue to talk.
But wait, back to that acting teacher. Did you tell the acting teacher you used his thing, and then what did he say?
No, I did not. I
quit the acting school.
Yes, that's exactly what I did. I eventually was like, oh, that's just a dude telling me to do something crazy. That's not an acting teacher. But I've come to understand like acting teachers, improv teachers, sketch writing teacher, like it's real hit or miss.
It is.
You know, you gotta find somebody that jives with you, and most people are not. When you first come out here, it's hard to be confident enough to go, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to move to another one.
Yeah.
And I was not. Eventually, I did, and I found the Groundlings, and I found some teachers there that I was like, oh, this feels good. They're tapping into something in me. But that is always my advice to people starting out. I'm like, you gotta be willing to like wade through a lot of garbage to find the people who are going to really inspire you.
Yeah, I think it's like therapy, right? Like you're never going to get your therapist right on the first go.
Right.
But for acting specifically, what I found is interesting is like just there's so many different perspectives and ways to approach it. And you can't just assume the one your friend is taking and maybe or maybe not getting something out of is the one that's right for you.
No.
And I do think it's interesting how actors sort of, I don't know, they're not some are self-sabotaging, but they get comfortable in an acting class, and even if it's not serving them, they think that they're furthering their career by just staying in this acting class. When you see them and they're not even doing the work, they're just showing up and they're thinking that's enough, and it's just like, this isn't helping.
It's because I guess that's what people are told.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, go find a good acting teacher, learn how to act, and you know, there is massive value to being in an acting class and doing scene studies and doing cold reading, you know, studies. But, you know, the stuff you really learn is from actually getting in a room full of producers and being scared at, you know, shitting your pants. And then the next time you go in, you're like, okay, I you know, it's experience and experience and experience and experience. And the cruel trick that this industry plays on us is that you can't get that without, like, it just doesn't come. So it's really the most unfair of all industries in this world. I was going to say country, but I'm sure I've never done it in another country, but it's a sick little trick. The devil of the entertainment industry is not one I wish to ever go pass through again. I mean, it felt horrible. I remember going to, did you ever do casting workshops?
Oh, I've done a number of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I went to a few that were really helpful and like got called in, but I also went to some that the casting director tore me apart so hard that it was traumatic. And
in a casting workshop?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Were you really bad? Were you really unpolished, or was it just something they were doing?
I'm sure I was very bad. But instead of giving me, you know,
constructive, they gave you destructive.
Yeah. I expected somebody to go like, okay, Ryan, I think maybe you're reading the script wrong, or, you know, they just were like, what is it? I remember, I can't remember who, and I wouldn't even say if I could remember, because I need to go back in. for her. But I remember.
Just give out her phone number.
Here's her phone number, 310. No, she said, she just stopped me in the middle and was like, "What are you doing with your voice?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing with my voice. What am I doing with my voice?" Oh, no. And she was like, "You're doing some are you playing gay?" And I was like, no. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, everybody thinks I sound gay. Am I gay? Maybe I'm gay.
Spiraling.
No, I'm spiraling. Yeah, I'm spinning in my head and spinning and going like, it's not wrong that I have a little bit of a higher pitched voice, and maybe some might say it's gentle, or I don't even know the way she got in my head. I still to this day go like, I feel like I think about my voice differently now.
That's crazy.
Because of that one woman's comment.
That's crazy.
And then she could have just said like, hey, let's try coming from a different angle on this, instead of going like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, and stopping you mid-scene.
And by the way, it happened again like 7 years later. A commercial guy was like, it was for a truck. It was like a Toyota truck commercial. And he was like, yeah, can we do it again? And this time, let's play it. I like the character you're doing, but let's try doing it not so feminine. And I was like, what is this? What is this? People like, but it's who I am. It's like,
there's a slippery slope there, right? Like, because it's all in the delivery. I took an acting class for a very long time where the very first thing he did in like the 4-hour introduction with the big group of new students was had us sit in a chair and people literally just threw what vibe we're giving off.
yes.
Construction worker, gay man, old hag. And some of them were biting, you know what I mean?
These are all about
but
you.
Those are all me.
Old hag. You do read Old Hag.
But like some women and some men in that class, both of them took offense to it.
Oh, sure.
And it was like,
if you get like slutty librarian.
Sure.
Or like, snotty butler. There are things that you're like, really?
Sure. But at the same time, it is important to know what vibe you're giving because
Absolutely.
like for what we just said, we're blind to how we're perceived, and we might think of ourselves as this audition is perfect when we're actually giving something completely off base. So there's like a fine line, but the key is the delivery, not interrupting you in the middle of a casting workshop, delivering it a little less severe.
Yes.
Did you stop going to casting workshops after that?
I did. Oh, no. I 100% did. I think that I remember that one so clearly. And I remember, who was it? The brother of, she had brought in like an actor, and it was the brother of one of the, who played James Bond?
Daniel Craig.
Before Daniel Craig.
Pierce Brosnan.
You know your Bonds. No, who was it? It was a
Pierce
brother.
Brosnan.
No, but this was like the brother of, maybe it was Daniel Craig's brother or something. I can't remember who it was, but I remember being like, oh, it's a brother of somebody famous. And she's like, this is the brother of XX. And I was like, cool. Like, great. Is he an actor or what? Like, I don't like, why is he here?
This is the same casting.
This is Obama's cousin. It's like, cool. Where can we get to the part where this is the same one where she tore me up?
Yeah, this is the casting director that brought us Nepo babies, it sounds like.
Yeah.
She introduced us to the idea of Nepo babies.
Yeah, she did. She did.
During your 10-year run we just talked about, you weren't worried about the auditions or anything. So were you working day jobs at all?
Never. No. I had one day job when I got out here, and I cold called businesses for some sort of phone service. And I worked for 2 weeks, and I remember the guy who hired me, we were in this like crappy little office somewhere on Lincoln Boulevard in Venice. And he was like, just go through this list, call these people. Here's a script of what you say, and I'll talk to you at lunch. Did it for 2 weeks. Never got one bite. Never sold one thing. And at the end, I remember I got one Bud Light commercial audition, and I was like, all right, I got to go to a Bud Light commercial audition. And that was part of the agreement of working there. He was like, if you get an audition, I'll let you go.
Yeah.
And so I went, and I got it. I was like, oh my God, I got a Bud Light. And he was like, listen, one audition is nothing. This is a pipe dream. You're not going to do anything in this business. Trust me. I used to work for William Morris. I know.
Yeah.
And I was like, F you. I quit. I didn't even tell him I quit. I just said, I was like, cool. And then left and never went
Wow.
back. He called me for like 9 days in a row. I didn't even get paid. I was like, doesn't matter. I got this Bud Light commercial. It's you know how you were talking about, like, I just need one.
Yeah.
And then I'm good. So I got the Bud Light commercial. Never aired. Never did anything. So I made like my $700 for the day. I was like, oh no. But luckily,
you've
that gave me the
survived.
confidence to go like, all right, well, I'll start looking for another job. But then I started to like book some other commercials. And luckily that has always fed me.
It's always been enough. You were never like,
Yeah.
oh boy, getting lean.
No, I mean, there's always points where you go like, all right, like I was pretty careful about putting a lot away in savings and knowing that there would be lean times. But no,
That's amazing.
I feel very, I'm really thankful that I've had the right rep and agents that have gotten me out so much that I've been able to survive that way.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a working actor, and that's like the dream.
I love being an actor that everybody does not know. I can go anywhere I want. I've made a living. I can go in a restaurant and nobody would be like, hey, it's you. Like I've never wanted that. That's never been my dream. I've just wanted to like perform, act, be on stage, get in front of cameras when I can, and then live my private life.
Yeah, I think that's a sweet spot.
Yeah. It's been wonderful. I mean, yeah. Do I get 60, 70 texts from random people a week? Yeah. But that's the part that feeds that little
Narcissism.
Yeah.
That and Gerald's podcast.
Oh, yeah.
12-year-old Gerald's podcast.
And Gerald. And I'm going to do that. I'm doing Gerald's podcast for sure.
If you just remember which number it was that texted you.
Yeah. No, I got it marked down. I'm going to do it.
When did you move to LA?
2004.
Okay, so that's crazy. You were doing stuff, a lot of commercials, I guess, probably when you first moved here.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have like real theatrical rep until probably 2010-ish.
Got it. And
And I was very bad at it when I first started.
Tell me more.
I didn't know. I got a lot of feedback of like, oh, you're trying to be funny in the room. You forget that even doing improv and sketch, you can push a lot more on stage. When you get in front of a camera, you really got to learn to pull it back and trust the writers and that their words and the story they're telling and you're helping them tell, that's enough. And you can play it like a real human being.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a learning curve for me, and still is even to this day. Because it's hard to like take somebody else's words and put them in front of a camera and perform them in a authentic way. That's why, it can come across sketchy sometimes. And I mean sketchy in the comedic sketch way. So I would get a lot of comments of like, yeah, he's pushing in the room, or, especially auditioning for comedy. We were like, well, it's comedy on stage. I'll just do the same thing I do on stage and in the room. And that did not work.
Yeah.
So slowly through the years, I started to realize like, oh, I can trust myself just to be who I am, read the words. It's still funny. And that's sort of where I landed. Yeah.
How did you get your theatrical reps initially?
Through the Groundlings. Yeah, only through the Groundlings. I would have never. I think the Groundlings has, a reputation where people are either going off to SNL or they're at least working consistently. So my manager, I booked a pilot for Fox like in 2006, and it was like it wasn't a real pilot. It was one of those kind of fake pilots. It was Fox, but it was a half pilot or something. But I was psyched about it. And a manager found me and was like, all right, let's get you an agent. And I was like, I don't know what it means to have a manager. Well, I need a lawyer. What? Why do I need a lawyer? Who's attacking me? But yeah, so he kind of led me, my manager, who I've had since for 20 years.
You had
now.
the same one the entire
Same
time?
one.
Very cool.
And we've kind of, he was young at the time too. He came from working with Peter Safran, and I think one of his first clients, and we have just kind of grown up together in the business.
That's
and
great.
He's, I mean, I have not a bad word to say about him. He's been like very supportive.
But I do.
But now I want to hear what you have to say about him. No, he's been great. Yeah. And so he got people to come to shows at the Groundlings.
Very cool.
And when people came to the Groundlings, they were like, oh, he's not as bad as people have said. We'll take him. But they did say right away, they were like, all right, first thing we want to do is get you to SNL. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
Really? Why not?
From the time I was out here, I was like, I have no interest in SNL. I had too many friends that were like, so some people loved it, but I had enough friends that were like, it's pretty poisonous atmosphere. And I was like, I'm not good. I'm not strong enough.
Yeah.
And I was, older at the time. I was in my mid 30s, and I was like, I don't want to move. Like even if everything worked out perfect, I'd have to move to New York. And this is not me saying I would have gotten it. This is just me saying, I don't even want to go down the road.
Yeah.
Because there's so much energy that it will suck out of me for the next like month or two to even go down the road. Yeah. So I was like, I'm just going to put that aside. And I can remember being in a room full of agents, and they were like, well, then what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be on a sitcom. And they were like, okay. And they kind of were like side-eyeing each other, like, why does this guy not want to go to SNL? He's a Groundling. Why would you do Groundlings and not want to go to SNL? And I was like, because I get something very specific out of the Groundlings. I've already have a assortment of relationships in LA with casting directors that I really love, and they get me, and I'm building those, and I'd rather work on that than put time into SNL. And some people are like, you're crazy. That was the worst mistake of your career. And some people are like, no, that's awesome. Like, good. You knew who you were.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in the latter group. I think that makes a lot of sense to know what you want and what you don't want. But back to the last OG point, like you said no to him twice. Did SNL be like, Ryan, come audition for us, even despite your goth protest?
At one point they did.
Like, who's this sexy and different Ryan that doesn't want us?
I remember getting a email from one of the writers who was like, would you consider coming? And I just was like, I can't. It would be and I already had a young boy at the time, and I was not a young boy, so
Good for you.
Yeah, and I just knew. I could feel it in my gut, and my gut is one of the things I really try to trust as I navigate, even today, through this weird industry. I think we all we always have that little thing in our gut that says like, this doesn't feel right, or this does feel right. I'm just scared of it, or
At that point, though, did you worry about saying no? Like, listen to your gut is one thing, but like if I get an Ozempic commercial that pays $400 or whatever, and I'm like, I don't really want to do it, I feel like, if I say no to this audition, that's just going to be karmically bad because then suddenly I'll stop getting all auditions. So like, have you wrestled with that at all? And in that moment, were you wrestling with that?
I think a little bit, but I think, I have, I feel like the relationships I have outweighed that, and the relationships I have with whether other performers or casting directors or anyone in the industry, I'm like, no, I have to trust that they know who I am. And I want to be happy performing wherever I perform. And I knew when I could watch SNL and be like, it's too, I don't think I could handle it.
Yeah.
Like,
it would become work, as you alluded to something earlier.
I don't want it to be work.
Yeah.
When I get jobs, I want it to be because like the last OG, I truly like, I had a great time doing it. I don't know if it's going to be the pinnacle of my potential, like as a performer, but I had a great time doing it. It came and it was like, I knew that it was going to I didn't even, when I went in for that once, and I remember my agent being like, well, they loved your tape. And then a week later I tested for something else and I was really disappointed because I didn't get it. And I was like, oh, and he was like, well, the Untitled Tracy Morgan project, which that's what it was called at the time, they still really like you. And I was like, great, I'm glad they like me. And then like a week later they were like, oh, they're going to test you. And I was like, what? I haven't even gone in for producers yet or anything. They're like, yeah, they're all out of New York or something. They're going to test you for that part. And I was like, okay, can I get the sides? Can I get the script of the pilot or whatever? Cause I didn't know anything. The sides for the audition were just a completely fake scene.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh no, they're just going to use your tape from the first audition you had to test you. And then probably 5 days later, I got a call and they were like, yeah, you got booked for two seasons.
Wow.
Off one audition.
Where you were the other reader.
Yes. But I truly think I got that because I was like,
yeah,
I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm just free and
I agree.
And yeah, it doesn't matter.
Back to that room of agents, asking you about SNL. Was that your manager had brought like 4 agents to see the Groundlings and then you were just talking to them all after? Or are you often in rooms full of agents?
No, that's the only time I've been in a room full of agents. And I thought I was going to this agency to meet with like one agent. And they were like, all right, come on in. And I walked in this room and it was a circle of chairs,
a squad
with nothing. Like it literally was like an AA meeting. And I was like, hi. And they were like, oh, hi. I like all around the circle. Hi. I'm Bob. I'm Chris. I'm blah, blah. And I was like, hi. Oh my God, what's happening? And they were like, so who do you see yourself like? What do you, and lots of questions about like, what would you want to do? What the SNL and what, like, you kind of have a Ben Stiller vibe or at the time, I'll never forget this. The guy was like, oh, we have to, it's a shame we didn't meet you like, I don't know how long ago it was, like 4 or 5 months ago, because you would have gone in on the Parks and Rec, the Chris Pratt role.
Yeah.
He was like, oh, you would have been perfect for that. And I was like, yeah, I think Chris nailed that pretty good. I think Chris probably would have gotten that. Yeah. I think Pratt might have nudged me to the side. But he was he was
an unknown. Yeah,
he was unknown. And
that's the power of Allison Jones. I feel like she just files those unknowns away.
Yeah, absolutely. She's.
What's your relationship like with Allison Jones?
We're both from Maine.
Oh,
Actually,
shit.
we're not. I'm from Maine. She visits Maine. That was the first. I had a general meeting with her.
It's very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I misrepresented. We're from the same house in Maine. No, I remember when I met her, she was like, you're from Maine? And I was like, yeah. But she did know I'm from Damascotta, Maine. And she knew Damascotta. And I think she said she actually summers there or like goes in vacations there. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's wild. But she is probably one of the most down to earth people I've met. Or, it's probably why she's so good at picking out people that are authentic and real and funny. And because she's like,
she can just talk to you.
There's no, she is who she is. There's nothing about her that's fake.
Wait, how did that come about? A general meeting with her?
Groundlings.
Oh,
yeah.
She reached out. Or
no,
Groundlings
I'm sure my manager probably was like, Ryan's new at the Groundlings.
Very
Would you meet him? And she probably was like, no. And then he bugged her for 2 weeks, and she was like, yes.
This is a great manager.
Yeah, he's a little bull.
I love it.
He is a bull.
You mentioned like relationships with casting directors, and like as somebody who hasn't really booked anything, that's I lean on that a bit.
Yeah.
And Allison has brought me in twice, believe it or not. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
Both post-COVID. And the fact that she brought me in a second time, I filmed it on this wall. But like the fact that she brought me in a second time, I'm like, yeah, it's validation. I must have done something right. And I hope I did something right. Rather than she forgot she brought me in the previous time. And this has just happened.
I don't think so. I'm
spiraling.
I don't think.
Me right. I'm spiraling.
Hold him down. Hold him down.
But no, when they bring you in again, it's like, I love that. That's like what it means like it up as an accomplishment.
Yeah, because you if you don't book something or you don't get a callback or something, our minds automatically go to like, I ruined it.
Right.
I screwed it up. I broke it. I did it wrong.
Right.
And the truth is like, no, you probably
did fine.
You probably did you may have done an awesome job,
right,
and you just weren't right for it.
Right.
When I did House of Lies, I remember one of the execs from Showtime coming up to me and being like, oh my gosh, we have been waiting to get you on a show. Like, we've seen you. And I was like, why are we not told this?
I know, dude.
As an actor, do you know how important that is to hear? Dude. Where you guys you liked me?
Dude, I agree 100%.
You liked me.
I think I've interviewed a lot of casting directors, and they say they just don't have the time, which I totally get.
I do.
But like, if in the situation where we did an awesome job and we just weren't right, I would love just like a note. He crushed it, but he wasn't right.
Yes.
I would just love that.
Yes. Oh my God. Can you imagine the difference? Because you'd be like, I don't care if I got the part or not. They like me, and down the road when they see a part that maybe I'm right for, they're going to have me back in. That would fuel me for 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have it sounds like you have a great relationship with your manager. Do you worry that he's keeping stuff from you, like maybe negative feedback?
Oh, they've certainly told me. There's a joke.
They've told you negative feedback?
Well, he's definitely told me negative feedback, but we've gotten on the phone before with like the team is what they call it, which is gross. But we'll get on a phone call and I'll be like, they'll mention something like, yeah, well, remember the offer that came in like last year about that's project, and they'll mention that, and I'll be like, wait, what offer? There was an offer? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, how much I remember asking them, how much happens that you guys don't talk to me about? And they all laughed. They all laughed. And they were like, yeah, you don't want to, like, we're not going to go there. But by the way, I don't mind that. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because I know they have a plan and they have an intention to help me work. And 90% of the time, 99% of the time, if there is something that comes across the desk of my manager, he'll send it to me and be like, read it and tell me what you think.
Yeah.
But I know there's stuff that they're like, yeah, Ryan's not doing that.
Yeah, there's for sure. I would just kind of. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's a hard thing because if I wanted to know, I'm sure I could be like, you got to tell me everything, and they'd be like, okay, you can know everything, but do you really want to go down that road? You
How
want
bad
it?
can it be though? Right?
Yeah.
It feels like
tough. I'm almost happier going like, well, you let me know when there's an opportunity.
But it's funny though you say that because now I'm like picturing like I've emailed agents and managers a few times to get people to come on.
Yeah.
Can never even get a whiff going through agents and managers. I have to.
No.
That's what makes this podcast hard. Is I have to go directly to the source, and finding the source is a very hard thing to do. Because,
I'm sure.
like, I've even reached out to PR people who are, it's their job to put people in front of nothing. They're
Nothing.
like, no, sorry.
No.
There's enough podcasts and celebrities do them.
Yep.
Who are you, Mike Elder?
No, it's I'm sure it's impossible.
Let me ask you quick. We're approaching an hour. What are you at, like, right now, let's say, and I know it's probably not, but are you at, like, peak auditions right now?
No.
When was your peak auditions and what was it? I'm just curious.
2007. No. Peak auditions.
Like, how much were you going out a week, a month?
I think probably when I first signed with my agency in 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, maybe 2010, I was blown out of the water with auditions and I hated it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't have, especially that pilot season, I remember being like, oh my God, how I have like 4 pilots tomorrow.
Wow.
Like I remember there was a week where I had like 7 or 8 pilots. And I thought that was going to last for, 2 months. It didn't. It kind of, there's only so many pilots.
Right.
But they kind of threw me at everything.
Wow.
And since I was a new client with them, the casting directors were like, well, let's bring him in and see what he's got. And I shit the bed on every one of them.
Yeah, that seems like it'd be counterintuitive in a weird way.
It's too much. And I didn't realize I had the power to go like, hey, can we spread these out?
Yeah.
And I learned that from a couple of friends who were like, Ryan, like, I remember, I think it was Ben Falcone, who was my director at the time, and Sunday Company was like, you can tell them you don't have time tomorrow for 3 pilots. Yeah. You can say, can I do one Wednesday, one Thursday, one Friday? Because these pilots don't audition one day.
Right.
they're auditioning for like a few weeks or 3 weeks. So I kind of learned that lesson and said like, okay, I can be a little selfish if it's going to make my performance better.
Yeah.
For an audition.
So what are you doing now? Like a month? How many auditions do you do a month?
I mean, right now it's pretty small. I'm happy if I get 1 or 2 a week.
TV auditions?
Yeah, or I would say like 1 a week for TV. Yeah. I think TV is still kind of getting back on its feet. Yeah. Commercials are hit or miss. I mean, commercials could be like, I could get 5 in a week, or I could have 1 in a week, or I could have 0 and then 5 the next week. Like they're kind of like they come in piles almost. Yeah.
Are you a person that like counts your auditions and like?
No, I've always been lazy. I've always been very lazy about that. In fact, when I the very like beginning of my auditioning, I was like, I have to remember what I'm wearing so I can wear that to the callback. And now, I'm like, what was I wearing? I don't know. I'll give it even yesterday, I think I went back in on one and they were like, oh, you're wearing something different. I was like, am I? All right, let's be honest. Am I though? Am I wearing something different? Did I get a haircut? Maybe.
I realize the irony of me giving you a pro tip, but what I do is when I'm in the waiting room, I try to just take a photo of myself.
Oh, that's smart. No, it's very smart. It kind of is my philosophy of that the less I care, that attitude bleeds into everything.
That's fair.
So I've always just sort of thought like, just relax. You're either hired or you're not.
Yeah.
And do your best in the room. But some people, I see them with books and they're like taking notes and they're like, Kia, January 16th, and they like write down the name of the casting assistant.
I do this.
Do you do this?
I do it on a spreadsheet. But for me, I
But
sort of...
that's your style, and that helps you.
It's
That's
ceremonial.
important.
It's like I'm filing this away.
Yes.
And I try to write a note of something I learned, like work on your eye contact or something. And then
Yes.
it's shuffling that away, and I'm focused on the next one.
And-
It's sort of ceremonial in that way.
And by the way, that helping you is the same as me not doing it helping me. They're both
Being
equal.
different. Yeah.
Because we're all these different animals that need different energies
Agreed.
to succeed. And my energy is like, I get really wound up if I start to
Overanalyze.
like
Yeah.
get into all this, the details. So I've found that I need to I have a joke with a friend of mine that like commercial auditions are toilet paper, and yeah, I like flush as soon as I walk out the door, flush, and then I go to the callback, flush. If I get in a veil, if I get in a veil from I erase it immediately. I look at the dates and I go, okay, I know I'm available, but like who's not available?
Agreed. That's so funny.
So, but that's the energy I need to be able to survive.
That's great.
And
That's fair.
Just
It works
because
for
you or somebody that's in the middle where they're like, I need something in the middle. We all have to find that area where we can be the best to ourselves.
Yeah. That's why I started this podcast, right? It was like, we try to make this formulaic, and it's not.
No.
It's a very nuance for everybody, and everybody has a different sort of path.
Oh my God. Yeah. Even like when you hear, celebrities giving acting advice and stuff, I'm like, yeah, that some are like, hey, I had no plan B, and this is like the only thing I can do, and I know I had to succeed. And I'm like, that advice could help some people, and then some people need to hear like, no, I worked as, I was just listening to, who was it? Wendy McCoven, McClendon Covey, who even through her whole career doing Reno and up until the Goldbergs, she had another job, like, and worked her ass off.
Yeah.
On the side because she wanted that security. That worked for her. Yeah. We're all different in the way we need to, like, I can't ask you to be like, how do I do this? How do I do it? It's like, I don't know. How do you do this?
Yeah. It goes back to that Will Hines comment. Be you, sell yourself.
Yes.
Be your brand. But to the former comment, the celebrity saying there's no plan B, I find those ironic because sure, that's one, but then we're not seeing the 10,000 others that had no plan B and now moved back to Chicago.
Have plan B. Yeah. Guess what? Most of us have a plan B. Yeah. You may not know what the plan B is yet, but guess what? We all have a little realtor in the side of us that's ready. Ready to sell houses.
I literally thought about being a realtor in COVID. I was like, I should get my real estate license.
I've thought about, what my plan B is? This is the truth, is going back to Maine and opening up a candy shop.
I'm into it. Maine seems beautiful and a candy shop seems idyllic.
Let's do it.
I'm in. There's a beautiful candy shop right by me. It's called Tuesdays. I have no idea how it's open. Nobody's ever in there, but it's a beautiful candy shop.
It's a mob front.
It's
100% a mob front.
Okay, my last question I like to end this on was, who took a chance on you? I think that's a valuable thing that we don't talk about, and it helps to have somebody take a chance on you. At least one person take a chance on you.
I mean, I could name. In my mind, everybody took a chance on me, but I will say my manager, who had no reason to, his sister came and saw a show at IO West. I worked at IO West. Did you really?
Yeah.
So at IO West, I did Harold's there.
Yeah.
And his sister, who a lesbian, came and saw me and was like, "Listen, I'm a lesbian, and I think this guy has charisma." and God bless her, because he came. He didn't even come to a show. He just called me and was like, "Hey, I'd love to meet with you." And I ignored him for I'm not kidding you, for over a month.
Wow, he's a bull.
Weekly calls from the manager, because I was like, I don't need a manager. What do I have nothing to manage. Like, I don't need it. He kept pushing.
He's great.
Until one day I finally called him back. And my intention was to say, like, dude, you got to stop calling me.
That's hilarious.
And he was like, hear me out. Calm down. Sit with me. I want to talk to you about a plan that could take you to the next level.
That's amazing.
And that he took a chance on me because I was actually a jerk to him.
Yeah.
And he pushed.
What's his name?
Tom Drum.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Ryan, this was great. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
It was wonderful. I really appreciate you having me come on.
My pleasure. You get a tail slate now to end this right here.
Hey, I'm Ryan Gaul.
That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that was awesome.
MTV and the Channel E. A thing for celebrity.
Thank goodness. I can release this information